Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is the third and final part of our story that's entitled There is a Lot More Than Bigfoot Lurking in the Wilderness. So without further ado, let's get straight into that. This story I'm going to tell you now comes from one summer when I was working with the NPS out in Yellowstone. I was lucky enough to spend 5 years working for the park, and to this day it is still one of my favourite locations. Now, for those of you who have not been to Yellowstone before, let me just tell you that this park is big. So big, in fact, that many park rangers believe that there are hermits who live off the grid in the park year in and year round. Some of the most remote places that don't see tourists and visitors and are able to go more or less undetected because there are so many places you could hide. Over the years there, I encountered some really weird stuff in the Yellowstone wilderness that would suggest that this is either true or that there is some strange dark energy at play out there. But the dark energy doesn't confine itself to the park boundaries, as I soon found out one year. Midsummer, when I was 27, one of my co-workers, who I'll call Nick and Monica instead of using their real names, and I had the same day off and had decided to go out to the nearby lake in southern Montana, right outside the northwest corner of the park. Nick used to be a scuba diving instructor and had a ton of gear along with a few wetsuits, so we decided to scuba dive and explore around the submerged ruins in Quake Lake. For those of you who don't know the story about how Quake Lake was formed, here's a quick history. In August 1959, a magnitude 7.3 earthquake struck the area in the middle of the night, causing a large chunk of one of the mountains to fall into a landslide that buried 19 people alive in their sleep and created a dam in the Madison River. This dam resulted in the creation of Quake Lake, as it later was named. Overall, the area affected by the earthquake had a total of 28 fatalities, and the damage was reported in a huge radius around the area. The part of all of this that the public does not know, however, is the disappearances that started happening after the formation of the Quake Lake that had nothing to do with the earthquake and subsequent damage. The government did a very thorough job covering all of it up, as not to alarm the public, and most NPS employees don't even know about it unless they are working directly in the area. As a 5-year veteran working at Yellowstone, I knew about the strange disappearances and the unsolved cases, but I was told under strict order not to tell anyone about them. Basically, once Quake Lake was deemed stable enough for recreational activity, people started going out there to swim, fish, or even go boating and do all the other normal things that people do on a lake. However, soon after the lake started getting visitors, people started mysteriously disappearing, all from the same area of the lake. Sometimes they would turn up all the way across the lake, drowned. Sometimes they would never turn up at all. But the thing that made the government cover all of this up was that with each body they actually found, the person died with a look of absolute terror on their face and bruises around their legs and ankles that looked like the shape of human hands. The government did countless tests and surveys of the lake to try to determine what this could be from, but they never found anything. So they covered it all up and placed restrictions on areas that could be accessed by the general public. Despite knowledge of the disappearances, Nick, Monica and I weren't worried about it. Nick assured us that all his diving gear was in top shape, and since Monica and I were both strong swimmers, we didn't give it a second thought. The area that we were going to dive at is called the Underwater Forest. It was given that name because of all the trees you can see sticking out of the water from when the lake originally formed. We know there were some underwater ruins close by as well, from a cabin that got submerged in the flooding, so we figured that would be a really cool place to dive and explore. So we packed up all the diving gear and all of the diving gear and into Nick's car, hooked up to his boat to the trailer hitch and set out for the lake. It was just about midday when we got there. We had a quick picnic lunch, then started to put our gear on while we digested. Nick gave both Monica and I a quick tutorial on how to use all the gear, and we did a few test dives next to the boat dock just to make sure we were ready. Once we felt good to go, we took off for the side of the lake where we were going to explore. As soon as we arrived, we anchored our boat and got ready to jump in. Immediately, I got a bad feeling, like really we shouldn't be there, but I brushed it off as nervousness and excitement. I touched the water next to the boat and it sent chills up my spine. The water in the lake was cold, but this felt really, really cold. I shuddered. Then Nick noticed and started making fun of me. So I rolled my eyes and put on my mask, and we jumped into the water and started exploring. As soon as I got in the water, all of my fears went away. This place was so cool. It was like a whole forest frozen in time, dead, underwater. We had all agreed ahead of time to try to stay near each other, but just in case, Nick had given us all waterproof diving watches so we could keep track of time. We agreed that we would surface every 20 minutes just to check in with each other, and if we got separated. Naturally, within about 5 minutes, we were all off on our own, but we all surfaced on time for the first 2 check-ins. However, on the 3rd check-in, Monica didn't surface on time. Nick and I waited a couple of minutes, thinking that maybe she just didn't look at her watch. After about 10 minutes, we started to panic. We made a plan to stick together to look for her and immediately dove back down into the water. We searched for about 20 minutes and there was no sign of her. Then we decided to return to the boat and radio in to the marina to get help, and within a matter of minutes they had sent a search and rescue team out to help find her. Every single minute waiting felt like an eternity. Then, suddenly, one of the search and rescue divers surfaced with Monica's unconscious body. All of her diving gear had been torn to shreds and they were just barely hanging on to her. The search and rescue boat sped off back to the marina so Monica could be airlifted to the nearest hospital. Nick and I closely followed behind in his boat. Once we got back to the marina, we were questioned by the cops and then released. They told us they were taking Monica, and Nick and I made plans to go visit her the next morning. Neither Nick nor I was able to sleep that night. We sat on the couch together at his apartment watching movies until the sun came up, and then we got in his car and headed straight for the hospital where Monica was. She was asleep when we got there, so I decided to wait until she woke up. We asked one of the nurses if she had said what happened, and the nurse said she hadn't spoken a single word to anybody since she arrived. She also said that Monica would start to freak out if anyone tried to touch her ankles. Hearing this made the blood drain from my face. Once the nurse left the room, I slowly and gently lifted up the blanket from Monica's feet and looked. There were deep, dark red and purple bruises all over her calves and ankles in the shape of human hands, as if people had been grabbing at her legs and dragging her to the bottom. The feeling of the blanket moving immediately woke Monica up, and she jolted up in a panic with the wildest eyes I have ever seen. As soon as she realised it was just Nick and I, she started crying. I sat down next to her on the bed and just held her. I asked her if she wanted to talk about what happened, and once she calmed down, what she said I will never forget. She said to me, "I saw a little girl. She was standing upright on the lake floor, as if she was outside on dry land. She motioned to me to follow her, so I did. She was running through the trees, and once we got to the edge of the underwater forest, there was a cabin with a light on inside. She pointed at the door and then ran inside. I was terrified, but at the same time curious, so I followed her in. As soon as I opened the door and entered the cabin, the little girl turned to me, smiled, and turned out the light. The cabin door swung shut and locked. I couldn't open it back up as hard as I tried. I swam over to one of the windows and started hitting it until the glass cracked. I really did try to squeeze through that window, but the oxygen tank was too big to fit. I felt something grab at my ankle and I turned around, and there There was the little girl, although she now was floating in the water and she looked like a corpse. Her skin was grey and falling off her bones, and her eyes were solid white. Out of nowhere, two more of these people appeared. They looked like her parents, perhaps. They started grabbing at me, pulling me back into the cabin, tearing at my wetsuit with their nails and teeth. I fought as hard as I could. I really fought as hard as I could, and tore off my oxygen mask and started fighting them off with it. I managed to kick them off of me just as I was able to squeeze through the broken window, and I swam as fast as I could away from the cabin without even turning back. Within a matter of seconds, I was so out of breath that I passed out. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up in hospital. Monica said that she told the search and rescue officers everything she told us. We were told that they did a thorough search operation for the cabin Monica said she had seen, but they claim that they found nothing. I'm not sure what exactly happened that day in the lake, but I do know what I saw on Monica's legs, plus the fear in her eyes when she told Nick and I her story, that I believe her. I have never gone back to that lake, but I did hear from a co-worker that they now have the area strictly closed off. Maybe they did find something after all. Whew. Well, if that didn't give you the creeps, guys, I don't know what will. I hope you're not listening to this whilst fishing or camping or in a cabin even. That would be the ultimate nightmare, in a cabin tonight after listening to that story. Well, thanks ever so much for listening. Don't forget to tune in next time. And why not like, share, and comment. Bye, guys. Don't forget, be safe. Don't be sorry.